Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. This is John with Tommy's Top Picks here to bring you your Fab 2.0 update for the week while I open this box of Uprising. Still a great product. Remember to subscribe if you like the comment, or give a thumbs up, or leave a comment if I say something incorrect or whatever. I think this will be the last one of these for a little while at least. I'm just running out of content, running out of boxes. So that's just where we are right now. If you want to join the Patreon and purchase a box through us, I can do one of these on top of a box opening for a patron. Happy to do that. But until then, or until I find a need to open more cards, I'm pretty much out. I may do a few more boxes here and there, and then I'll throw something like this together. Or maybe if there's big enough news, I'll spring for the box myself and just do it that way. Maybe something else, open something else. I don't know. We'll see. All right, so let's jump into it. Fab 2.0, still looking good. The Dragon kerfuffle that happened last week is pretty much all flushed out of the market. We expected as much and said as much, so we're back to prices we were at before for the Marvels. Crown of Providence is actually peaked. It looks like it's coming down for the first time since the release of the product itself, and that's on both the cold foil and the rainbow foil, with the rainbow foil actually coming down and the cold foil flatlining at the top. So I suspect it will come down in the next few weeks. As we said, expectation for these things are going to be your collectible items will have some sort of peak. The lowest trough will probably be around the time of maximum hype for the next set, so post-release, those first few weeks, because people will dump excess of these to forward new stock in the new product. That's just generally what we're seeing so far, and I fully expect that to continue to play out with 2.0. Could be wrong. If that is incorrect, we'll probably make some content specifically around that just to talk about this, since it is 2.0's first full cycle with Uprising, and I do want to kind of give as much data on that. The Fable cold foil is holding strong at around 309, which is about where it has been. I think it was like 315 before, so it's trickled down a tiny bit, but it's barely notable. I love those rainbow foils. I wish they were worth something. Flame Scale Furnace still looking good. It had its little J curve and flatline. For the cold foil, that is, it's at 200, and then the rainbow foils started to come down. So you're starting to see this post like preparation and deck building drip on these ones that were hard to like. They were just hard bottoms, right? They did not come down like everything else that wasn't as demanded. So Chico's flatline, but they came down a while ago. And then, of course, you can go into Cornet Peak for Icelander. Flatlined, again, came down a while ago. So there's the ones that came down initially weren't as exciting, as hype-driven. They dropped down flatlined. The more desirable ones, like the generic, went up and to the right for the first few weeks, maybe a month or so, and then flatlined. And then now we're starting to see things come down. Which is interesting and good to know for the future that, yeah, they will have their peak period. And then the kind of mixed bag middle tier, would say, is, had usually the J curve, so it would drop, rise, find a flat line, and is holding there. I suspect those will come down in a trailing period. So we'll probably see that fall sometime after this, kind of at a point where other people are interested in new stuff, as opposed to this kind of deck building and brewing period that we're still in, with Road to Nationals just finished and Nationals coming up, Pro Tour coming up, all that stuff. There's a lot of brew test, and I think decks are settling and people are not buying as much stuff, so the prices are just come down. Erase Face is down at $17. I find that to be a critical thing, since it's the generic that everyone wants. Also seems to be kind of hard to pull. I don't know if that's just my local area or what, but I only got 2 out of all the boxes I opened. So I think that's reasonable to say that they're somewhat hard to come by. The Dragons, as I said, are back to that 150 to 170 mark. Nothing special there. The smaller Dragons have actually come back down too, because they got up to 77-ish range. They dropped back down to, say, 40 or so a week ago. Now they're under 40, with many of them at 30 and even in the 20s. So nothing crazy unexpected there. One of the ones that is holding up, surprisingly, is the Marvel Icelander. She's still at 110. I think her peak was like 2030 maybe, and then she dropped down below 100 and then slowly climbed back up, and now she's just kind of sitting there. Obviously, the less desired dragons are also at the lower end, with the more desirable and functional dragons at the higher end for the Marvels. Nothing else is really that exciting within the set. We have some alt arts, a rewind, and the Ash and Ashwing cold foil. They're holding up, like $10, $20, $30, something like that. Nothing crazy or remarkable there. Most things are just, kind of sitting flat. Extended arts have a higher demand, but still aren't super expensive. So pretty good. I think accessible. I think even bling is accessible, with the exception of the legendary cold foil. So so far, I think Fab 2.0 is doing what it wanted, making the cards viable for people to get. Even a little bling, you can buy a dragon or two, sort of thing, without spending too much money. And since you usually won't have two of the same dragon out at the same time, one of the marvels is sufficient, I would think. So kind of cool. I like it. So far, so good. Let's dive into our topic of the week. This isn't super long, so you have to bear with me. We'll see how far this goes. But I did want to talk a little bit about what's happening in the economy broadly, because there's a lot of conversation out there, a lot of incorrect statements and things that we called out here on this particular series way before anyone was talking about it. If you recall, I think it was the first one, maybe the second one, we talked about what a recession is. And now it's become political. It's a recession. It's not a recession. Da, 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 da. It's ridiculous. As we said in that video, way before this was a topic people talked about, because it wasn't really a definition yet. NBER is the official definer of a recession. I don't know if I said this in the previous one, but essentially it is a somewhat subjective measure. It takes studies of broad swaths of the economy to decide if we're in a recession or not. It is not the simple metric, the rule of thumb, as it were, of 2 periods or 2 quarters without growth or negative growth. That's your rule of thumb. That's your easy marker if everything is operating on a normal circumstance. But guess what? We're in a freaking pandemic still, and it's not operating on a normal circumstance. So that rule of thumb only goes so far. This has not changed. No one changed the rules about what it was. It was always this. It was just, there was a shorthand, and shorthands are exactly that. Oh, nice. Full art. Shorthands are exactly that. They're shorthand. It's a simple way to remember for dum-dums that can't realize there's depth to it. I apologize. I just get a little frustrated when people are like, oh, they're making this up or they're changing things. It's like, they're not changing anything. It's always been this way. It's been this way for, I don't even know, maybe a century at this point, since the Great Depression sometime. And we talked about it before, so this isn't, I clearly am not making this up, because we actually talked about exactly how this happens. On average, in the post-World War II period, recessions last 11 months. They don't declare it until 6 months in, right? And that's because that's 2 quarters down. That's kind of the earliest you can call it. And the last one, I think it was the 2021, it took them, I believe I said it in there, I don't remember the exact number because I did the research right before the episode, but I believe it took them 12 months to declare it, which is what happens when it's complex because of a pandemic. So we still don't have an official declaration. I did expect to see one by now because I thought this was a more standard one, but as we've seen the data show up, it is not a more standard one. It is a very weird one, and let's go ahead and talk about why, because that's part of what I want to talk about today. So yes, we did have 2 quarters of negative growth, which is your rule of thumb definition of a recession. Other things that apply and are relevant to make a recession, and I'm not just repeating talking points from Biden administration, this is just a fact that's out there and you can look it up, is things like inflation, things like employment, and things like economic activity, CPI, etc. Well, CPI is inflation, essentially. That's consumer price index based inflation. So it's about consumable products, but keep it simple. 2 of those things right off the bat are just not operating like a recession. The first one is employment. This just came out like 2-3 days ago. 500,000 jobs added to the economy. That is not a recession. That is the opposite of a recession. That's a growth period. That's jobs being added. That is not a recession. That just doesn't happen. You don't get increased employment during a recession. That's literally the opposite of what a recession is. So no, that part says it's not a recession. And then the other one is the inflation rate is just came out, and this was probably 3 weeks ago now, something like that, maybe 2 weeks. It was like 9.2 year over year. And I think we had a session on that. Like we talked about that, how, 9.2 on top of an 8.6 or whatever it is, 17% inflation is serious business, and you need to consider it for your costs of living and such like that. So with those two factors in play, that's 2 out of the 3 core metrics, and there are more. Again, they do giant studies on this to make a declaration of an actual recession. But those 2 factors, or 3 out of the 3 factors, those 2 look like it isn't a recession, and only one looks like it is, and that's negative growth. Negative growth can happen for a number of reasons. If you dig into the actual, I love the way that looks. If you dig into the actual numerics of what goes into growth, GDP growth, right? Gross domestic product itself is kind of a convoluted calculation all by itself. It doesn't apply everything. It ignores certain parts of it, and there's very fair criticisms about it not being a very good index. And if you want to know more about it, I'm not going to dig into it because there's been arguments and papers and papers and papers and papers written on this. And there's plenty of information out there. But the point is that GDP is also kind of a soft rule of thumb measurement. It's not a hard measurement. It, like I said, excludes parts of the economy which don't make sense to exclude when you're trying to determine a recession, but it's the number we have that's set up and easiest to deal with, right, without having to recalculate the whole thing. So point being that, point being is that the recession is not happening at this stage. From 2 out of the 3 main metrics that the Fed in particular looks at, which is mostly what people are concerned with, how the Fed's going to behave. So the job of the Fed, I believe we've spoken about this before too, is to manage 2 factors, growth and employment, and they're diametrically opposed factors. So it's a very difficult balancing act for them to handle. And what that means is if inflation is growing and employment is growing, guess what? They're not going to act as though we're in a recession. They're not going to lower interest rates. They're going to continue to increase them because the 2 factors they're involved with the most are hot, and so they need to continue to try to cool them off. Obviously, if they go too far, that's where we get into trouble, and then that does trigger a recession often. And I think that's what the market is starting to kind of decide whether it's going to happen here. And this is the last pack, so I'll clean this up and just sit here for a minute and chat about this, but not too much longer. So what happened is, and I suspect this is not fact, none of this is financial advice as always, but I suspect what happened is the big market players took a look and saw, I love that, burn them all in foil, sexy. That's gorgeous. I need that cold foil one, I don't have that. So big market players saw the employment and said, oh crap, we're not actually in a recession. So pulling out of the market, moving into all these different things is probably not the best move right now. Not dumping in, I guess, is the best way to think about it. So what they did was they ended up pulling back with the expectation that inflation, that was a big mistake. The Fed's interest rate would be increased. So they said their previous plan was aggressive, 75 basis points, I think, per quarter or something for the next, or 3 times in a year, something like that. Which is very aggressive, like record-setting, historically aggressive. And this says they're going to continue that plan because those 2 factors are still in a overheated market and they need to splash water on it and cool things off. And so they're going to continue to increase those rates. So the market immediately dropped as a result because they saw this as a more aggressive Fed is going to continue. I think a lot of people in the market thought we hit a recession officially, despite what many people had said, Biden administration, et cetera, and that it would be a period of, okay, now we gotta slow it down on these rate hikes. Well, guess what? It wasn't. We're not, and the Fed's going to continue to increase rates, it looks like, going forward, and that means the market needs to cool off more, and so that's what's going to happen. I fully expect that to be the case, and I told you 2-3 weeks ago I have a 10-week plan minimum. So, 10-month plan minimum. So I plan to put money in on a monthly basis. Well, actually, I do it on a weekly basis, so I mix it up. But on a weekly basis for 10 months, going from basically 2 weeks before the 6-month period of recession, right? Whenever that video was, that's basically, it was a little bit before that, but give or take 4 weeks or whatever, right? So the idea is that every week adding to positions and things that I find investable and interesting during this downtrend. And that does mean you're going to get, as Rudy likes to say, Chuck Norris in the face. It means you're going to put your money in, it's going to be worth less the next day. And that's a downward trend is when you want to buy. And you do it the whole time because you don't know when the bottom is, and you just keep going, and eventually it doesn't go down anymore. I'll tell you one thing that doesn't happen. Recessions don't happen when everyone says it's going to be a recession. If everyone's expecting it to decline, they move their capital in ways that safeguard from that decline, and it doesn't happen. And I think I mentioned this before too, that I'm starting to worry whether we're going to actually see a full-on recession this way or a fast recession, because simply put, everyone was expecting it, and when that happens, it's basically not going to happen because people are so defensive against it. Real recessions, real declines, real crashes, they all happen when something unexpected hits the market and kind of shocks it into uncertainty and fear. And when that happens, when everyone's expecting it, there's no fear, there's just defensiveness, and you don't get the shock and you don't get the drop. Now, historically, and this is more speaking on crypto markets because I have more experience with the volatility of those than I do with equities. I've been in equities longer, but it's just there's been more volatility in crypto in the past 10 years than in equities, frankly. Equities have just been going up for 10 plus years, which is part of the reason why this recession does need to happen, and we do need to cool things off. Point being that in the crypto market, when these sorts of things happen, it tends to be a fake. So everyone's expecting a drop. It doesn't happen. They say, oh, okay, we're fine. And then it slowly, deflates some more, right? People get bored. And then just as people are starting to not pay attention and kind of not really know what's going on, it'll hit a major drop. And usually there's some sort of news that triggers it, like something people don't expect, and they just rip their money out there. It's kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back. I don't know if that will happen with equities in this period, if we'll get to this point where everyone's like, oh, I thought it was a recession. Where's the recession? Where's the recession? They get bored of this non-recession and put their money back in, and then something scares them out, and then they pull everything out. It happens in some markets that are volatile. I don't know if equities have as much exposure to that sort of panic. Obviously, crypto is way more panic-stricken than equity. But I wouldn't be surprised if we do get a surprise bottom at some point due to some, major thing happening in the economic structure, be it through the logistics we've talked about, or the microchips, or maybe war, additional war to the Ukraine war, or maybe it's Taiwan, right? It can be any number of things that trigger it, but a big thing triggering it could, at this unstable point, cause a drastic drop in prices. If you have the ability, limit orders are a great way to catch drastic drops. I have some set up in both equities and in crypto, just in case there's a massive drop, because typically when there's a massive shock drop, it recovers relatively quickly. That's what shakes out the, kind of tied up money and tied up orders. And that's when things start moving again. So historically, that's what I've seen. So I am prepped for that. Otherwise, my plan will continue to be the same. And that's just slowly dollar cost average in across the board on a ton of different things over the next 10 months and just keep at it. And that should take us well into the next growth period, right? Say it is on average 11 months. We're 6 months in, I guess 7 months now, right? So call it the next 9 months, whatever. Point being, it was a total of 16 months was the time frame that I was expecting to be from the start of it way back in called January, right? So if that was the case, then 16 months will be the middle of next year, right? A little bit off from that, but close enough. So that's when I'll stop putting money in again at this aggressive rate. I'll slow it down, and we should be on the growth path at that point. Again, not financial advice. Nothing's guaranteed. It's just the way I've operated, and it tends to make me money because during these periods of uncertainty, when people are afraid to put their money in, if you're putting your money in, you get outsized returns. That's just the way markets work. So that's it for this week. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope it wasn't too sanctimonious. I just get a little frustrated with some of the people out there saying things like, oh, it is a recession. Absolutely. It's like, no, read a textbook. It's not technically how it's defined. it's just a useful shorthand, and we do have that information available if you search it on the internet. Although right now, with the politics of it all, I'm sure it's going to be impossible to find. That's the problem with this sort of thing. It's like it's a numeric set of data, and it got emotional, and I hate that. It makes me nuts because you can't analyze anything with real data and raw data if everyone's political opinions get added into and factored in. So very frustrating in a time when we could use some quantitative analysis instead of emotions in politics, but you know how it is. That's just this world these days. I hope that doesn't bum you out. I hope you're using this information to your benefit and to the growth of your financial capability, be it in cardboard, be it in equities or crypto. And again, none of this is financial advice. Do with it what you will. I'm just a guy that talks about cardboard and economics and nerds out about quantum time crystals. So, I don't know why you would listen to a guy like me about that. So anyways, I hope you guys are out there cracking packs, playing games, having fun, enjoying it. I am having a blast. I gotta tell you guys, we're in the hype season of the year for me. I am so excited. There's so many good games coming out in fall and just new stuff. I'm hyped for a ton of stuff. I was just messaging Tommy. I was like, Tommy, they got new stuff for Sorcery on TTS. So we got to play, and we just did, by the time you hear this, maybe it's out. I don't know. We did a Grand Archive recording, so that should be out soon. And, we've been playing that. There's just a lot of games, that are just looking like a lot of fun, including playing some Magic. Just some fun stuff. And I've told you about my love of Brothers War. So I am hyped. I'm excited. There's some real positive stuff. I do hope that fall, I don't know if I believe Rudy fully, but I do hope that fall is a more positive economic time. I'm not sure we're there yet. I'm not sure I would say recession is off at this point. It may be a slower one. It may take longer. I don't know. I can't predict the future. I'm not Nostradamus. I can just tell you about the past and what's happened there. So anyways, like I said, I hope you're out there cracking backs, playing games, enjoying the hype of these upcoming things. There's some really cool stuff happening. Please take care of yourself financially, and take care of your family and loved ones first, obviously, before any of this stuff, because these are just cardboard games, and that's all it is. Should be fun. Should be a hobby. I hope you guys are having a good one, and I'll see you next time.